In this episode of Primeval Sanctuary, I built a Spinosaurus enclosure with the backdrop of a swampy biome. I also built a little guest section along with it as well, but be warned, it does have some major design flaws. So if you want to avoid the mistake I made while building the guest area, stay tuned for the next part of the video as I give you some tips on how to avoid this error in your next sandbox build. Hello everyone, welcome to the building segment of this video where, like I said in the intro, where we will be building a Spinosaurus exhibit as well as a very flawed guest section. So if you want to have some tips on how to avoid what I did, just stay tuned for the part where I build the guest section. But yeah, right now, none of the guest section stuff is really happening. I'm just building some attractions and amenities. And right now, I really don't usually place restrooms in my parks, and right as I decided I decided to delete it because I didn't have space for the fencing to block the back of the restroom, because as we all know, the backs of restrooms and really any amenity, it just looks really disgusting and garbagey. It doesn't look disgusting from like the standpoint of, how do I say this? It just looks disgusting because there's a bunch of garbage bags there. So that's why I usually block it off. Now, I'm finally building the guest section, and right now I'm just building this little section here which is bordered by some of the multi-wall pieces, and in the end it's going to turn into this Hammond Memorial, because of course, without Mr. John Hammond, this channel would not exist. Really, any Dinos channel wouldn't exist, because after all, JP, Jurassic Park, is what made this dinosaur niche more popular. But again, when it comes to the tips, I was trying to tell you guys, the main tip is, if you want to make your guest sections look better, don't build too big. And that's a mistake I commonly make when it comes to building guest sections, right? Because right here, the path is very bulky, and there's pretty much no space for decorations because there's no like places where the path is cool look. It's hard to explain, but my point is, if you want to build a good guest section, build small. Therefore, the decoration, you can fill it more easily with decorations, and also use a variety of different path types, because if you don't, then it's just, there's no outline for you to place the decorations. And of course, path is one of the major, it's not even a decoration, it's more of a utility, but path is still a great way to decorate. So that's one of my tips as well. Use path to your advantage. Yeah, not just decorations, because from a bird's eye view, path can look really pretty as well. And yeah, normally I build from the standpoint of looking at it in first person mode as a guest, but I also try and make it pleasing to look at while in bird's eye view, say when you're like building or in capture mode. So that's why I find it really hard to balance whether to use a bunch of decoration or not, because if you use a bunch of decoration, it'll look wonderful from bird's eye view, but it won't look that great from the first person view. But whatever, enough of that yap. Time to talk about these viewing galleries that I'm placing. Normally you don't see me placing much viewing galleries because I usually use concrete barriers or multi-wall pieces or even rocks to border the enclosures. But this time, since it's a carnivore, I decided to use some viewing galleries because, you know, these things are dangerous and you don't want them to creep over the multi-wall pieces just for them to eat people. So that's why I'm using viewing galleries. Anyway, right here I'm building this sort of memorial for the Spinosaurus skeleton, which obviously gives you a teaser of what is going to be in the enclosure, which, spoiler alert, it is a Spinosaurus. But yeah, I just decided to use the rock terrain paint and paint this hill with that terrain paint, and I also filled the hill with a bunch of rocks because it just looks cool, right? I do wish I added water to be a part of this little thing, but whatever, it's too late now, and it still looks pretty cool right now. Okay, now I am working on some path inside of the enclosure. Now, path is always a really good guideline if you want to build a swampy enclosure. Just build a bunch of path in the enclosure, get some water, place it all around the path, and it would automatically the water will go over the path, which is pretty not fancy, but pretty neat and pretty helpful if you want to randomize your location, if you want to randomize where the water goes in a swamp enclosure. So yeah, right now I'm doing something I normally don't do in enclosures these days. Right now I'm using foliage brushes. Normally in enclosures I don't use much foliage brushes. I usually just use decorational trees, and maybe I'll use some foliage brushes to cover some, like the edge of water and all that stuff. But right now, the majority of it is foliage brushes, which it's kind of annoying considering how much more detail you can get into with the decorational trees. So that's another tip for you. Use the decorational trees instead of foliage brushes, because foliage brushes are always very random and you don't know what you're going to get out of them. And yeah, right now, one of my big ideas, it's not really a big idea, but one of my ideas was to place one of those biosyn viewing towers inside of the enclosure, and that viewing tower would be surrounded by trees. So once the viewing stand is lifted up, it would just be this giant circular dish, really, orbiting above the horizon of the trees. I wouldn't say horizon, but hovering above the trees. And that's sort of the effect that was achieved here. Once again, though, I probably could have achieved it better if I used the decorational trees. But yeah, now I'm hatching the Spinosaurus, and I did accidentally release it out of the hatchery and not via airlift, so I had to hop into the helicopter and I had to tranquilize this thing. It's gonna take a while. I don't know how to narrate this, really.
I have to admit that this next dinosaur is impressive. The Spinosaurus is perhaps the largest of carnivores. Of course, I'll never get close.
I'll just let Mr. Finch talk.
But that's why I have you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Finch. But right now I'm just trying to tranquilize this Spinosaur because I don't want it to terrorize any of my guests per se. So I got into the helicopter, got out the tranquilizer gun, shot it a bunch of times, and after that I transported it back to the enclosure, rightfully where it belongs. And eventually it will get knocked out. I get out of the helicopter and I send it back where it needs to be. And after I do that, I actually delete the Hammond Memorial and I replace it with a Homalocephaly enclosure, which is probably an even bigger waste of space, because I think my main thought process around this was, hey, this Hammond Memorial thing, it's not taking up enough space, it just doesn't look very good. So I decided to replace it with something that I thought it would look good for a substitute, but still it looked kind of bad. It looked worse, to be honest. This save didn't save anything, is what I'm trying to say. So that is very unfortunate. I also tried to use some multi-wall pieces to hover against the edge of the path, but of course, if you guys have used multi-wall pieces before, you just know that will never ever work. So I used some concrete barriers and decided to border the path with that. And after this, I of course transported some Homalocephaly into this, but instead, luckily, I didn't transport it directly out of the hatchery, but instead I used the helicopter to transport it, so that's a bonus. However, I wouldn't really mind if the Homalocephaly wandered around the park literally just randomly, because they are peaceful creatures and I think the guests would be pretty pleased if they could approach them. That's also one of my other ideas for parks. I want to build this sort of backstage area where guests can see the baby dinosaurs in their nurseries up front. That's also a nice idea to a nice building idea to have in JWE 3, because of course there's baby dinosaurs in that game, and that would be absolutely wonderful. Like a backstage nursery area with a bunch of baby dinosaurs. That'd be epic, man. That'd be epic. Anyway, there's 10 seconds until this this segment ends, so let's move on to some cinematic shots, and yeah, I'll see you then. And with that being said, that wraps up the building segment of this video. If you'd like to see more of Primeval Sanctuary, be sure to like and subscribe. Also, the day after this video is released, I'll be posting my review of Jurassic World Rebirth, so be sure to stay tuned. Have a great day, and see you next time.